Hello and welcome back to another playthrough of Panzer using the solo rules. This time we're converting a scenario from the first expansion. The scenario is called number 17, Land of the Giants, Hungary, March 1945. I picked this scenario because this is kind of an interesting one because it's a meeting engagement. Both sides are going to be coming on the board at the same time and clashing someplace in the middle of the boards, which kind of takes the solo rules to another level, the meeting engagement level. So far, from what I've played through and shown people and worked with on my videos, it's just been the attack and defense type of scenarios, but this is the meeting engagement, and I've worked out through other scenarios I've played through MBT and Panzer, kind of a technique for having a decent meeting engagement. I mean, nothing substitutes for an actual two-player game, but I think this comes close. It helps. It's not, like I said, it's not perfect, but it does kind of simulate the fog and the tactics of an opponent coming on the board with you. So it is actually good. And I've kind of played this scenario both ways, both against somebody and now solo, and I think this is going to play out well for this. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. So the situation is this. This is actually a fictitious scenario in Hungary, basically in the latter stages of the wars, having kind of the biggest tanks come together and clashing. For the Germans, you've got the Tigers and King Tigers, and for the Soviets, you have the IS-2, IS-3 series coming into play. Which is kind of interesting because the IS-3, as we'll see, is kind of the first step into the modern Soviet tanks that dominated for right after the war, right through the 80s and 90s for the Soviets, and after the breakup there as well. So this is kind of an interesting scenario. We're going to have King Tigers facing off against the IS-2s and 3s. Which is kind of interesting because we're going to see some really higher numbers in terms of firepower and defense on here. I'll go through that here in a little bit once we get to the actual module. So first off, just to give you an idea, this is a 4-mapper arranged the long way. You've got maps 3, 5, 6, and 8 arranged as we have here. I'll go through more of the details when we get to the module. But it's big. This is going to be nice because it's going to give a little bit of a room to maneuver for both sides coming on the board before they actually clash somewhere here in the middle to this. Some special conditions on here. Nothing real fancy. You can see through here, there's no force grade initiative, which could be very interesting using the solo rules. Remember, we'll be rolling and getting a 50 or greater to actually get initiative for our player side, and less than 50 obviously will be the opponent side. So that'll be interesting. That might be a little bit more balanced within there. Stream not passable on board 8. That's the stream up here, as you can see. Stream on 5 is just gully hexes, so it's a little bit of terrain modifications, but I don't think it's going to affect us too much. We will be using ammo and morale rules, so we will have alternative points. Command span rules will be in effect, and actually I'll modify these a little bit for the enemy units, which I should tell you, I've chosen the Germans as the player and the Soviets as the enemy. So we'll be playing as the Germans. The Soviets will be coming on the board. So we'll be using these to help keep units, in control a little bit before the clash in the middle starts. Just a little bit more about the IS-3s. Not necessarily engage too much in the towards the end of the war, but in this case, like I said, we're doing a scenario that they did engage against the other heavy German tanks. As for the setup, as I said, both sides will be coming on the boards. The units will be entering on the appropriate edges over here. As I said, I've modified the Soviets a little bit, and I'll show you that when we get to the module, what we're actually going to do for them and how they're going to come on the board. This is still going to come into effect as well, where each force will enter one at a time, coming across, and will be that way at least for the first turn, if not a couple more in there until we get close and start spotting each other in there as well. So we'll cover that a little bit later. Our victory conditions, pretty straightforward. 20 turns, got to get the most points. The victory margin here is 230. We're using the alternative points, remember. So it's going to be 230 so that they actually, the side will actually get a good win. Anything under 230, they will still win, but it'll be a very marginal win. And remember, there's no draws in Panzer itself. So somebody's going to get some points and hopefully win. Now there's a couple special point rules up here as well. There's a bridge up here in 8cc7, and whoever controls that will get 90 points awarded at the end of the game. Yeah, for each turn that they control it. That's right. It's each turn they control it. So with a maximum of 900. In other words, they can only control it for 10 turns, or less on there. So that's important too, because if the Soviets or the Germans get that, that can really rack up a lot of points pretty quickly. And then to the Soviets, if less than 3 German combat units from the Panzer Grenadier Company, we'll show you what the forces look like here in a minute, exit the board from the Soviet side, so over here. So there's an exit requirement for the Panzer Grenadiers only to get 3 or more for the Germans, or 3 or less for the Soviets to get that points. The Germans don't get any of these points. They will get the next one here. They'll get VP points for those units that exit off. And in this case, those infantry units, 3 of them would actually be 120 points. So there's a good incentive for them to get off the board there as well. Then our usual normal elimination, knockout, brew out points will be awarded on here as well. Another thing to point out for people to remember, tracks do not count as victory points. It's only knockouts and brew ups for tanks. So you gotta kill them to get the points. And as I said, 230 for the victory, or for the good victory. Anyways, moving on here to our forces. Taking a look at the Soviets here. Now this is, as I said, a lot of heavy armor. So first off here, we've got a heavy tank company consisting of IS-2 44s and IS-3 45s on here. So we've got 5 of the 44 version, 2 of the 45 versions. We've also got some scouting vehicles, BA-64Bs, to hopefully spot our units, or the enemy units. Then we've also got an SU battery, basically a company of SU 100s plus some ISU 122s to hopefully support these heavy tanks to try to defeat those German tanks. And then we have a motorized rifle company, which consists of 3 platoons, 2 armed with SMGs, so they'll be good in close combat, and then 1 rifle armed with bazookas. So they will be good in a defensive role there as well. So that's the Soviet force, 3 companies. For the Germans, we have a Kampf group, Hartmann. The first company is a heavy panzer company consisting of the big tanks, Tiger 1s and Tiger 2s. So there's heavy command, there's a Tiger 1 command tank, and then there's 2 Tiger 2 tanks in the platoon, in one platoon I should say, and then 2 platoons of Tiger 2s. So we'll actually have 4 Tiger 2 tanks, which are pretty impressive in this module. We'll take a look at the statistics once we get to the module. Then we have the Panzer Jaeger Company. This consists of Jag Panthers here and here, this command, and then 3 in one platoon, and then followed by Jag Tigers in a second platoon. Then the last company is going to be a Panzer Grenadier Company consisting of rifle units armed with Panzer Fausts in all three platoons, as well as Recon Company here as well. So it's pretty, as you can see, they're pretty matched forces in terms of the units, the quantities of the units, and the quality of the units as well, with Panzer Fausts, bazookas. We've got some anti-tank units, the Panzer Jaegers and the SU units, as well as the heavy tanks up here. A couple things to note about this, if you didn't notice already. The heavy units on both sides are veteran, and they have outstanding formation, meaning they're going to get a little bit of bonus on here when they attack. Same thing is going to be true up here for our heavy tank companies for the Soviets. They're veteran and they're superior. So they're good forces to face off against each other. So those are our forces. As I said, we're going to take the Germans, Comfort Group Hartmann, and we'll use them and control them and have full control over them. And then the enemy player will be the Soviets. So that's a little bit about the scenario itself. We'll be using all the rules from Panzer, advanced, of course, with some optional sprinkle in there as well. We'll be using morale, turrets, other things I can't think of off the top of my head right now, but we'll get them all in there. Also, one thing I am going to be using, which is new in here, which is from the 4th module, is something called Quick Draw, where superior forces, things that are veteran or higher or better than the other forces, will be able to fire simultaneously with the other units. So in case the Jag Panzers, say, fire at this heavy tank crew or heavy tank company at one of these tanks, that tank would be able to fire back at them at the same time, and their effects would be applied simultaneously. So that's kind of an interesting little wrinkle to this as well. Get in some good firefights, and could be mutual destruction, or it could be immediate destruction. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. So that's kind of the basics of it here. So let's take a look at our module, and we'll bring this up over here. And I'm playing this on Vassal, as I've played before. And you can see the setup with all the maps over here. Just kind of a tour of the maps. You can kind of see the terrain features. Biggest one over here is this big hill over in the southwest corner, followed by a big forest over here right next to it, just to the east of it, or excuse me, just to the west of it. All bisected by a narrow trail, or path, I should say. Going across here. Coming across, heading west, we have some towns, some smaller hills, some woodlines, some rough and scrub areas over here. To the north of that, another bigger town, followed by a little hill that's surrounded by a gully. This is all gully. This is not water. This is gully. Some small hillocks over here, some rough patch here. All bisected by a road. Then we come up to board 8 here, which is all river, and all this river is impassable. So in other words, we can't go across it, whether by infantry or by vehicle. Have to go by bridges, but there's plenty of bridges, at least for the Germans, 3 bridges up here, and there's one right here, which is actually the Victory Point bridge that I was mentioning about before. Germans will come on the board on this side over in here, and I'll explain my attack here in a little bit. And then the Russians, Soviets will come on the board on the west side over here and advance up this way to try to block. Now you see some markers already out here already. These markers, if I zoom in here a little bit so you can see this, on the west side here, these are victory markers to say this is the victory boards where the Germans can move off and get victory points. We also have, as I said, that victory point for that bridge over here, right there. It's in blue, because both sides can get it. And then you also see some victory points kind of not randomly placed, but strategically placed. And these are going to be used as part of a tool for getting the Soviets on the board and following a kind of a preset plan for moving them forward. Kind of along what Soviet doctrine had for the time, that they'd have different points that the units would head towards and be a control, what they call control point, for their advance. So we have several of these out here, and I've kind of laid them out what I would think would be kind of how they would progress up here, using the road network, path network here as much as possible to advance up to take the objective, this guy up here, as well as providing a blocking force to prevent the Germans from getting off the board. So that's what these particular hexes are, and these will be used with the solo AI to guide us, or guide the Soviet units into battle, as well as moving them around during the battle. So that's what they are. The other thing I have over here is the actual hidden Soviet units. Now, the way that this is going to work, there's a slight modification of the solo rules. Each one of these, you notice there's 10 of them. Each one of these are going to represent the individual Soviet platoons of units. So you see, if we look at the setup over here, this is one platoon, this is one platoon, this is one platoon. So altogether there's 10 of them if we count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then command units will come on with the appropriate ones. Now command, obviously, for the Soviet AI is not going to be as strict as it will be for the player. Just adds pretty much another tank to the mix. They will be used for command and control as they're moving up and into battle. Of course, once battle happens, that'll kind of go out the window in favor of the AI. So that's what we have over here. And what will happen as we get up here, each one of these units will move up, and as we do our spotting in our initial phase, if we get a spot on one of these units someplace in here, we will actually roll on a little table I've put together over here, which will allow us just a simple way of randomly choosing which platoon will show up on here. So this is going to be very random. They're not going to come up in their company orders, presuming that during the setup of the attack on this, the field commander here, decided to mix them up a little bit, but they will still be in their command ranges, meaning that the platoon, the company headquarters, will still have to stay within command range of the units on here. And you will see this as we progress, because mainly the Soviets are going to come on this path up here and then down in here as well. So they'll be within their range, and they'll stay within their range as they're moving along. But that will get us on the board and give me, the player, some feeling of, okay, I got to figure out who these guys are before we go racing into battle. And it'll hopefully allow me to have a tendency to use my scouting vehicles, my recon vehicles a little bit more, and hopefully the Soviets randomly will do this as well, so that this will highlight the use of reconnaissance first before they get into battle. So hopefully it will work out that way. We'll see how it goes. Let me zoom back out here. That's kind of what's going to happen. One last thing here, just going to outline the units. I wanted to show you the statistics on these. We've got some pretty heavy vehicles coming into this, and we can see here, here's the Jag Tiger. It's got some pretty decent firepower, pretty good armor here as well. We're also going to have the Jag Panther. Again, good firepower. Armor's a little bit less, but still workable. But the firepower is pretty impressive, again, with an 88. And then we got our King Tiger, which has some impressive armor, although its turret is a little less than I expected for this level. Hull is impressive, 48 points in the front. The same with their firepower, 48 over there as well. And then, of course, we've got the Tiger 1s, which at this stage of the war was looking a little bit dated. You'll notice their firepower is a little bit less, still an 88, but it doesn't have the firepower of the King Tiger with a longer barrel gun on there. And the armor is, it's about like the Jag Panther at this stage of the war. It was becoming a little bit obsolete at that point, given what was coming along from the Soviets. Now, on the Soviet side of things here is the ISU 44, 122 millimeter gun. Its armor, fair for this stage. Good firepower, or decent firepower on here. We have also the SU 100. Again, this was looking a little bit dated. Armor much less than the ISU 122. Firepower was still pretty decent, actually a little bit better due to the longer barrel of the gun. And then we also have our IS-2, which is pretty impressive for its time. Decent armor, decent to good armor. Good firepower on here, 122 millimeter gun. So they could do some good damage. And then, of course, we have the IS-3 M45, which is very interesting because this is starting to show the modern Soviet tank coming out of the war. It had the now known pie platter turret, where it is flat and round all the way around, very cramped, very tight quarters in there. But it gave a very low silhouette for targets to shoot at. So you notice its size modifier is 0. You'll also notice that its armor, because of its very radical slopes, 47, very, very good armor, best in the scenario, as well as some decent other armor for hull front and everything else. Firepower, fairly decent, same 122 millimeter gun as the IS-2. So we see the same statistics over here. So that's a bit of what the scenario is going to look like, how it's going to play out. So I wanted to give you an introduction to this. I think how it's going to go for the next installment of this, I will be starting it out. We'll be going through turns, probably 3 or 4 turns, because they'll be everybody just be coming on the board, trying to maneuver to get position out here. So I may condense those in to the next one on there, and then we'll progress on from there as it goes. So I hope you enjoy, and stay tuned for the rest of the videos in the series, and see how the battle turns out. Thanks for watching.